We're getting almost to a year since the war in Israel has started. And when you follow the news, you mainly receive one side of the story.
Now to the Middle East, because the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says 19 Palestinians have been
say
killed.
That at least
Israeli airstrikes
it
today.
was a violent day across Gaza and the West Bank. Palestinians
But then, there is the truth.
We're going to go down into the tunnel shaft 20 meters below where the hostages were murdered.
Okay, so let's establish some facts. We're talking about Gaza, the Gaza Strip. A tiny territory. How small? Well, it's only 25 miles long. That's a little bit over 40 kilometers. And in its widest place, it is a little bit more than 7.5 miles. So that's 12 kilometers. That's very, very tiny. But let us compare it to something so that you have a better understanding of how big exactly it is, or how small it is. So this is Gaza next to New York. And as you can see, Gaza is smaller than the city of New York. That's how small it is. Now, the war in Israel has started when Hamas and many of the people of Gaza entered Israel and committed horrible crimes of war. Here you can see the area, the cities and villages that were decimated by this brutal attack. The results were sobering and qualified for a true genocide. No children, women were spared. Additionally, Hamas captured and took into Gaza 251 hostages. Meanwhile, Hamas militants fortified themselves within the taken territory and wanted to expand. This is, however, when the Israeli army, the IDF, blocked the expansion and began eliminating Hamas militants. Within few days, the Israeli army took back the control of the taken territory. But everybody knew this is not over, and Israel had to go into Gaza. The objective was to eliminate Hamas and, most importantly, get the hostages back. Currently, as you can see on this map, Israel controls the majority of the territory in Gaza. Additionally, Israel has created a massive humanitarian area that is labeled here with the yellow color. We'll get back to this and why is this important. To eliminate instant terror attacks, Israel has created a buffer zone around Gaza and also a special security area. And finally, in recent days, Israel took control of the so-called Philadelphia corridor. And this is a massive, major step to winning the war with Hamas. Now, before I will explain why this piece of land is so critical, I want to show you something cool. So, if we zoom in to the very east-south corner of Gaza, you will see this. This is the end of the Philadelphia corridor and also the end of Gaza because the sea is the limit. Now look at this picture. This is also showing you the end of the Philadelphia corridor, the sea, and an Israeli flag. Those flags were put there by the Israeli soldiers that wanted to show that now they control the entire Philadelphia corridor, from the border with Israel to the sea. Okay, but let's talk why this narrow strip of land called the Philadelphia corridor is so important. Here you can see the area of Gaza again, so it's shown by the green color. And the red color points to the Philadelphia corridor. So this land connects three entities: Egypt, Gaza, and Israel. And according to an agreement between Israel and Egypt, Egypt was to control this territory. We'll get to that. But when the Israeli army finally started controlling the Philadelphia corridor, they were astonished by the sheer amount of tunnels they found in this very narrow strip of land. not only they found a lot of tunnels, but huge tunnels. Tunnels were found that were so high and so wide that you can drive a car through them. It was just something that even the Israeli army was shocked about. And guess where those tunnels were leading? They were leading to Egypt. Yes, to Egypt, that was supposed to control this territory and not allow any shipment of weapons. Now, what is the most shocking thing about all of this is that when the war started with Israel and Hamas, when Hamas committed those horrible things to the Israeli citizens, some of those tunnels were still operational. That is just shocking. Now you can understand why Egypt was so opposed to Israel entering the Philadelphia corridor. Because truth would come out. And it did. A whole network of tunnels was found underground. Now, Israeli army instantly began eliminating those tunnels that were underground. And it was a spectacle to see. But imagine walking through those tunnels, those dark places. The Israeli soldiers had to check them out first before they would detonate them. And it's like going down to hell, and in a very literal sense. A place of darkness and great pain of the Israeli citizens. Imagine being there for months, in total darkness sometimes, not knowing if you will be rescued. But the Israeli army fights for the hostages. Okay, but let's review again what is happening here. So before the war, Israel was controlling all the borders with Gaza, all except one. And only recently, as of just few days, Israel is controlling also the border with Egypt. But it's not the first time Israel is controlling this border. Israel used to control this border. How? When? Let's talk about it. So, in 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to divide the land between Israel and Palestine, two states that were to be created. So here you can see the layout. The blue color shows the territory controlled by Israel, and the green color shows the territories that would be controlled by the state that would be created, Palestine. Now, two things that I would like to point here. First of all, this territory here is basically useless. This is a desert. It's not very good for living, for agriculture, for anything. It's a wasteland. The only benefit really for Israel to have this territory is the access to the Red Sea, for which Israel also had to fight its wars. But that's a topic for another episode. However, what I would like to emphasize here is that the true beneficial territories that Israel would receive would be those territories you see here. The state that would be created, Palestine, would in turn receive quite good territories like Judea and Samaria, north of Israel, and the territory that is important to us, so Gaza. Now, despite the disadvantages of which I spoke and also not controlling Jerusalem, the Jews accepted this partition plan, while the representatives of the Palestinians said no. Additionally, when Israel announced its independence, she was attacked by all of her neighbors. And I want to repeat this. Israel did not start this war, the war of independence. It was like in the case of Gaza. Hamas attacked first. And now they're worried that they're losing. The war ended with Israel defending its independence and surviving. But that's not all. Israel not only survived, but it was able to control more territory at the end of this war, which Israel did not start, than the partition plan proposed. So, in other words, it would be better if the Arabs did not start this war, because they would be controlling more territory. They gained nothing. What is important for us, however, as we discuss the history of Gaza, after the War of Independence, it was Egypt that started controlling Gaza. But not for long. The next sequence of events important to the history of Gaza starts here. Let's zoom in this place. As you can see, this is a very narrow water passage called the Straits of Tiran. Now, if we zoom out again, we will see that this is a place where again Israel's and Egypt's interests collide. Egypt, of course, controls the Sinai Desert, which borders with the Straits of Tiran. But this is also an important ship route for Israeli ships that leave the port of Eilat. In fact, this is a gateway for Israel to reach Africa and Asia. And in fact, a lot of goods that come to Israel travel through this narrow passage from Africa and Asia. Now, Egypt was never happy that Israel is using this important passageway. After all, this is very close to Egypt's territory, the Sinai Desert. And there were several attempts by Egypt to block this passage and not allow the Israeli ships to go through. The first major one was in 1949, so a year after Israel got its independence. But the one we're gonna talk about happened in 1967. So what this meant is that no ships that were coming out of Israel or going to Israel could enter this strait. And that was a big deal for Israel, because by that time, 90% of oil that was coming to Israel was coming through this route, coming from Asia. So if that blockade would remain, Israel would be totally destroyed economically. By the way, this is quite remarkable. Israel was importing oil from Asia, while Israel is located in the Middle East, which is the land of oil. But that's what happens when you have bad neighbors. Today, Israel is less dependent of the Strait of Tiran, but at that time, this was a huge problem. But why do I mention this? I mention this because it is important to what happens in Gaza next, because this cycle of events started the Six-Day War. During this conflict, Israel defeated Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and gained control of vast territories, such as Judea and Samaria, the Golan Heights, Sinai, and Gaza. Now, Israel returned the Sinai Desert to Egypt, but it did not leave Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and the Golan Heights. However, after years of international pressure, Israel left Gaza in 2005, evicting 9,000 Israeli citizens and leaving 25 settlements. This is also when an agreement was made with Egypt that Egypt will control the Philadelphia corridor. So Israel agreed that they will leave Gaza, but the Philadelphia corridor will be guarded by Egypt so that no unauthorized smuggle of weapons would happen. Egypt, under this agreement, was to deploy 750 border guards to control this area. But when war started and the refugee camps started appearing on the border with Egypt, Egyptian troops basically left the area. Now, as Israel was gaining more and more control of Gaza, Hamas militants, Hamas terrorists, were withdrawing to areas that Israel still did not control. And the two areas that Israel did not control were Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor. Now, I want to show you two clips that refer to this situation.
Our position is that Hamas should not be allowed a safe haven in Rafah or anywhere else. But a major ground operation there would be a mistake. It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza.
Today we are in a situation where Israel has done a massive ground operation in Gaza. The Israeli army entered this city. And just listen to Netanyahu's response to this. This is very interesting.
We went into Rafah. And you remember what the international community and the international press and many of you reported before that. You said they're going to be stuck there. There are 1.4 million people in Gaza. They moved from the north to the south. You're going to have thousands, 20,000 killed. You're going to have a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe. They had no place to go, no food to eat. Now report honestly, because here's what happened. They all left. They went to the humanitarian zone, which is 2 miles away, less, on the beach. They have tents. We supplied tents for 150,000 people. The aid agencies supplied the rest, and some of them carried their own tents. They have a place. We supplied water lines, sewage lines, food. There's more to be done. Medical.
But even before the ground operation, Israel was entering those restricted areas that the international community said you cannot enter there, there will be a catastrophe. But special units went in, and you know what they found? They found hostages. And listen just to this report of a special operation in Khan Yunis.
Monday before sunrise, somewhere inside Gaza, 2 hostages rescued in a heroic operation are making their way home. They are not the only ones whose hearts are warm. For a few hours, all Israel felt their hearts filling up.
For me, it was as if I was on a mission to rescue my own father.
4 days after the brazen operation, the Fantastic Four who entered the hideout in Khan Yunis are recounting the dramatic rescue operation, step by step.
Now, I will have the whole interview on my X and Telegram channels. So make sure you sign up to those channels and you will be able to see them. I will leave a link in the description so you can find it easily. Now, the tradition to save the hostages goes back to very ancient times, even to the times of King David. And it is remarkable what Israel can do to save the hostages. And in my future episode, I will speak about those traditions and why Israel is committed to even give out 1,000 terrorists for 1 hostage. So I will talk about examples from the Bible like the King David, but also other examples in history. So if you are interested in that, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Sign up for my email list. I will send you an email when a new video comes out. And please consider supporting the channel. The best way to do it is through Patreon and PayPal. All the links you will find in the description of this video. Okay, so what Israel did when everybody was saying don't go in, don't go in, don't go in because it's going to be a catastrophe, Israel actually was very successful in moving all those people from the border with Egypt to this new humanitarian area that they created. And this is actually a much better place for the refugees to be because you have the sea, you can have support coming from the sea with medical, with supplies, with food, with everything. And since the war has started, Israel has supplied the people of Gaza with millions of tons of food, with medicine, with shelters, with supplies, with clothes, with many things. And when the people were moved, the Israeli army entered this piece of land, including the Philadelphia corridor. And of course, as they entered, they did discover huge amounts of tunnels that were leading from the Philadelphia corridor to the territory of Egypt. So, as we talked, Israel started destroying those tunnels. And since Israel is controlling now all the borders with Gaza, Hamas days are numbered because they have no supplies from other places, no shipment of weapons, no shipment of money. They are cut off finally. So if the international community will not force Israel to leave, Hamas will be defeated. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this summary was interesting for you and gives you some more information on the situation in Gaza. I wish you all the best. Have a great day. Shalom.